what we weren't prepared for was the huge exposure with new fans that was going to happen when the trailers dropped. I couldn't keep up with the pace of comments and messages, and it was overwhelming.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mort. This is The Garage, and I'm joined today by my friend Josh Zimmerman. How you doing, man?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I gotta do a little bit of a Mort history here, which is that I used to play in a band many years ago. We were playing locally, and people kept on talking about this band called The Silent Comedy that was playing at then was called the Detroit Bar, now it's called The Wayfarer. And people were saying their shows are wild, they're crazy. People were lining up around the venue to get inside to come and see you guys, and so us being locals, we're going, we gotta find a way to play together. We ended up being able to connect, and I did what everyone did at the time, which is I'd search for your music online, and on YouTube came across your band, and you guys had I found it because it was in a trailer for a video game called Darksouls.
Oh my God, please help me, knee deep in the river trying to get clean. He says wash your hands, get out the stains, but you best believe, boy, there's hell to pay. Yeah, you best believe, boy, there's hell to pay.
So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, Josh, tell me about you and who you are professionally, and tell me a little bit about the band.
The band is called The Silent Comedy. We started quite a long time ago, and we were very casual in the early years of our development. We had not really a set lineup. A lot of different musicians would play with us and record with us. Sometimes we would have like 14 people on stage because we would have horns and strings, and it was a very rowdy show, and it gained a reputation for being a very rowdy show. We would play in, dive bars. We'd have like horn players standing on the bar and playing, and a very fun band. And we started off a little bit more like folk inspired and a little bit more quirky, for lack of a better word, like Go Bordello or something.
I've got to interrupt here. Visually, the way that you guys portrayed yourself at that time was so different from all of the other bands because, for lack of a better way of saying it, you guys went more 1920s, and that was at a time when no one was doing that. And then all of a sudden, craft beers and twirly mustaches were everywhere.
Yeah, we were certainly on the front edge of that wave, and we were really inspired. The name of the band, The Silent Comedy, we were inspired by the early days of film and Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and all of that stuff. And so that's where our inspiration came from for how we would dress. Over the years, the huge lineup really tapered down as we started to tour a lot, and then the sound changed as well as we started to tour kind of constantly. We kind of morphed into much more of a rock and roll type show and sound, and then really like a 4-piece lineup that is kind of the core of the group, even though we still incorporate a lot of musicians to this day and kind of mix people in and out. But we became much more a rock show over the years.
Okay, so rock's a great term for your music, but it's also generic as well. So if I'm a newcomer to your music and I go to look for you on Spotify, what are some immediate references musically that you would make?
I mean, we're very inspired by and somewhat similar to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds as far as the instrumentation and whatnot. Also, Kings of Leon, their earlier to mid progression albums, not quite the arena rock that they became.
When I listen to like Exploitation or Bartholomew, which we'll talk about in a minute, songs like that, there aren't really reference points to it. There is a real sense of originality about how you guys write songs. I can't think of a lot of bands where I go, oh, they're doing an Arcade Fire thing here, or they're doing a Nick Cave thing here. It sounds like you.
Yeah, I think we are just inspired by a lot of different things. My brother and I traveled the world, and so we got to hear a lot of really different forms of music in our young life. And my brother is really the musical brains of the operation. When we spent time in India when we were kids, he got into all of the different modalities that Indian music uses and time signatures and stuff that's so different than most of what Western European ears are used to. So we were just inspired by a lot of that, and then it goes into our heads and blends up with our life history and kind of comes out in this strange form. We still write some very, out of the box sounding stuff.
I thought that the story of you getting your song into Dark Souls would be actually kind of boring, because normally a publishing company picks up your song, they pitch it to, different people, and then they go, I like that song, and then they pay you some money, and that's it. But that's not what happened here.
It's interesting, there's many different ways that people can get their music synced in film and television, or different marketing applications. But for us, we were just starting. We were extremely DIY for our whole early history. And so DIY that we painted our own shirts in the beginning. So we started like that for quite a while. And then the show really, the kind of whisperings about the Wild show reached LA, and we started to get representation, which was a very strange and different thing for us. And so the Dark Souls thing kind of happened right at the transition point between those two things, between being extremely DIY and having more industry representation kind of come on board. But interestingly enough, it wasn't any of those industry people that led to that opportunity. So I worked in still photography when I was younger, and then I was starting to transition into video, and I was a freelance editor when the band first started. That was kind of my main full-time thing. And I knew people who also were interested in the same stuff. So there was a guy that we had met in our early days as a band, who hung out at the same bar that we would play a lot of shows at, and he was in the film world as well. So him and I would always talk about different inspirations and our goals and aspirations, what we wanted to do in the future in that world. And then he moved to LA and started working for a company, and he was doing editing primarily. And so it was this guy who was a friend of ours who reached out of the blue. He had moved to LA. I hadn't really talked to him in like a year or two. And he reached out of the blue and said, hey, I'm working on this piece. I'm cutting this trailer. I think your music would be great for it. Can I use your song All Saints Day? And we said, yeah, absolutely. No idea what the project was. Then he came back and said, they like this trailer that I cut together, but they want something a little bit more high energy. Could I use the song Bartholomew? So he cut that. We didn't hear from him for a while. And then he came back and said, this doesn't happen very often. They like both of them. And he said, do you guys have a licensing person to negotiate this deal? I'll put you in touch with the company, but you really want someone advocating on your side. So we were just starting to work with our management, and we went to them and we're like, we need someone to negotiate a deal. We have no experience in this. And they hooked us up with the person who is just incredible. She's really good at her job. The company was Bandai Namco.
Yep. And
so we get connected with them. The trailers were for Dark Souls. We were not really gamers at that time. We had no idea what the game was.
In fact, just as for anyone watching, no one knew what the game was at that time. In fact, the company making it made a lot of mech games, which are giant robots fighting. And they're notorious for making games that are overly difficult. This series and this developer was not making games, at least to my knowledge, that were huge blockbuster hits. But Dark Souls, I don't know what you know about it, but since then has gone on to become a huge franchise.
We were so ignorant about it. And, because we got people in negotiating it, and this is something that for band folks, the reason why those intermediary people take a cut of what you get is that, they threw out a very small number for us, and if we didn't have someone negotiating on our behalf, we probably just would have said yes, because we were young and
DIY.
So she got involved, the person who negotiated our sync, and quadrupled their initial offer. So it turned into something that was very big for us, because it financed the next step of touring and stuff that we were doing. But because we didn't know about the game at all, and we didn't really know about the gaming world at all, what we weren't prepared for was the huge exposure with new fans that was going to happen when the trailers dropped.
What was that for you? I mean, in terms of, was that a very noticeable thing in terms of who was listening or even showing up to shows? Were people referencing, oh, I heard your song on Dark Souls?
It was more noticeable online than anything. Facebook was more of a active thing for us back then. And I think we had 2,000 Facebook followers when the first trailer dropped, and it went to 20,000 like overnight. I'm still the one who handles all that stuff. And I couldn't keep up with the pace of comments and messages, and it was overwhelming. You know, to have that drastic kind of jump, we were just totally unprepared for it. We were like, how do we even write back to people? You know, I'm a person who I really am connected with the band. You know, it's very much like an extension of what I care about and like my personal artistic, you know, drives and everything. And so I really care about responding to people when they reach out and like connect with us. And I just wasn't able to, like, physically, you know, I had too much going on. It was wild. It was a very wild experience. And then we were like, oh, this game is huge. We have no idea. And then once we did the deal and everything, they sent us a bunch of copies of it, but we're so not gamers. No one had a platform to play it on at all. So we've still never played it. Now that Elden Ring is coming out or has come out and it's much more a topic of discussion again, we are planning to sit down and play Dark Souls for the first time and connect with how bad we are as gamers.
What do you know about the Dark Souls franchise in general?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's Demon Souls as well. And then I just know from chatter online that Dark Souls is really difficult. And that's part of why we never played it, because back in the day, I was like, oh, I would love to play it, but I am so out of the gaming world. All I hear from people is how it's tough for really experienced gamers. So yes, I would probably be terrible at this game, you know? But the visuals are cool. Obviously, we saw the trailer before it was even released, and we were like, wow, this game looks amazing. Now, over time, we've done a lot of licensing stuff with our music. It's so rare for a company to license 2 songs for the same property. So it was just such a non-conventional first experience in that world, and we're extremely fortunate. You know, it was something that like no one could replicate that path, because it was so specific to just our friends and who we knew and this very lucky course of events. So it's interesting, but we certainly had nothing to do with it as far as making it happen in any way. We were just really fortunate. Yeah,
you weren't seeking out trying to get it onto something because someone really loves video games. It just, you're just song, you wrote something authentically from you, like you said, and it just happened to fit perfectly with this trailer. Tell me a little bit just about the song, because it has a very apocalyptic do or die feeling in the song.
You know, it's an interesting thing. So our band is structured kind of uniquely, and we, for most of the history of the silent comedy, there's not a whole lot of collaboration in the songwriting. It's like just my brother and I. That song Bartholomew is different, where a guy who used to be in the band had brought this kind of rough song idea to us, and I am very particular about the sound that the band has, and I'm very particular about certain kinds of songwriting things. So I had told him, like, there's a spark of something here. And because of my work in editing, I said, like, I think if some changes were made to this, it could have a lot of potential for sync, you know, to be a song that has an energy that really works well with picture. But I had told him, like, you need to let my brother totally retool it if it'll make it on one of our records, because in the state that it's in now, it's way too different from what we do. So my brother and that guy then spent a couple months actually working in the studio, and my brother basically just, like, the analogy were a house, he just like ripped the song down to the studs and built a whole new house around it. And a lot of it had to do with the percussion. So the big drums that are a part of it, it's like that, none of that was kind of a part of the song. There was a lot more polyrhythms, and kind of every time I would listen to a version of it, I kept saying, like, simpler, you know, more basic on the percussion. It needs to just be huge in this sense that there'd be no, you know, as musicians, I'm sure you are familiar with, sometimes you get so focused on doing something cool or different, you could, like, make it a little harder for the average person to connect with that song. So that's the input that I have a lot with my brothers, because he comes from a jazz background and he likes all kinds of crazy stuff musically that I'm always going like, it needs to be more basic. And with Bartholomew in particular, because I was spending so much time editing video, there was a lot of rhythmic stuff that I just said, you know, take this out completely. If it has more of this like big quarter note feeling, it cuts well for pieces. So in some way, I mean, we had a perspective of our music working well with film, but we just had no idea like how to get there.
It's interesting to hear about the arrangement of it, or even just like having to work with other people creatively, and then you get these unexpected surprises. Like this is the first one that really goes out, you know, as wide as it does.
Oh my God, please help me knee deep in the river trying to get clean. He says, wash your hands, get out the stains, but you best believe all this hell to pass. Yeah, you best believe all this hell.
My brother and this other guy who was in our band co-wrote it, and I think at that era of the silent comedy, something we were really doing, my brother and I were the primary songwriters, and we were trying to write songs that had the personal emotional connection in a fictional context. So, you know, like a lot of my early songs, it's like I would think about an era in history that I really was fascinated with, and then I would take my own personal like heartbreak or whatever emotion and put it in. So like there's a song on the same record, Common Faults, that Bartholomew is on. There's a song called 49 that I wrote that's all about like heartbreak, but instead of just making a breakup song, I put it in this world of the gold rush in California and, you know, all the themes that were taking place there. So that's what this guy, Tim, who used to be in our band, that's kind of what he did with Bartholomew. He had a lot of family issues and things that were really close to his heart and were really difficult for him. So he basically took those and put them in this kind of like mythic, universal hero's journey kind of language. And that's really what the song comes out of. So for him, I know even back in the day when we would do press and stuff, he really didn't want to talk about exactly what the song is about. You know, it sounds like almost like a J.R.R. Tolkien kind of, you know, when you listen to it, it has this kind of bigger than life mythic quality to the lyrics. And he did that on purpose to kind of put layers between the real meaning and what the end song was.
If you go to the video on YouTube where it's just the song, it's just a picture of you guys, there's like 5 comments, the first 5, where someone's like, oh, Dark Souls, and someone's like, oh, such and such TV show. How many things has it been licensed out to?
It's an interesting thing about Bartholomew, and then we've seen it happen with other songs as well, is that Dark Souls trailer got so much publicity and so much exposure. The reach of it was huge and in ways that we never could have expected. So like, I know Variety wrote articles about the use of these kind of like indie rock songs in advertising, and that was a big deal. And there was all this talk in the gaming world about them, you know, with a game like Dark Souls, you would have assumed they'd use like some big orchestral piece for for that trailer. And it was very bold of them to not do that. And so it made a lot of waves. And what happened was so many people saw that trailer. You know, a creative director at A&E was a big gamer and saw it and went like, this song would be perfect for the new show that we're working on, which was Hatfields and McCoys. They reached out directly to us to see about licensing it. And again, it was like a kind of lucky stumble into it thing, but Hatfields and McCoys went on to break every ratings record that existed in cable television. Wow. They extended, the trailer was performing so well on television that they extended the initial like limited deal like 4 or 5 times. And wow, we made a lot of money from that, to be frank. Then as soon as it had those 2 very big placements, it just takes on a life of its own. So we still today get people reaching out to sync it constantly. And we actually turn down a lot more opportunities for it than we agree to.
Really?
Yeah, because it's just kind of like an inside baseball thing. But once it makes a certain amount of money and has a certain amount of looks, most of the folks in the industry would advise you like not to place it in lower budget things after that.
No, but that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of bands aren't thinking strategically like that. They're just thinking, oh, cool, money. But they're not thinking of the value of the song, because a lot of us start bands, particularly if you're coming up through punk and hardcore and all, real DIY stuff. You're just thinking, one, I don't want to sell out, but then two, whoa, money's kind of cool. I like paying my bills. Given what you do and what you've experienced, what do you kind of notice are some things that people are looking for, if there is anything that they're looking for?
As far as for what people are looking for when it comes to like music supervisors or advertising people, it goes in trends. So at the time when Bartholomew was getting a lot of placements, we were very like on trend for what people were looking for at that time. It's very like textural, gritty, big drum beats, but also a song that starts very low and gets epic. The film and television industry just went through a trend that's probably waning now, but to have people cover very well-known songs and do them totally differently. And so it was like, for a while, like every TV show and movie had like, Cruel Summer or something, but done in a super emotional way. For a band that's starting out, if you do covers and put even videos of you performing those up online, that can be a way that you find your audience. And then for sync people, if you do a really neat cover of a well-known song, they can license that for much cheaper than they could license the original master recording.
Isn't that how Justin Bieber got discovered? He was doing drum covers or something? It's cool. People will get interested in things that you just don't expect them to get interested in. And they're going to search a lot less for your original song than they are for a song that they like that you're playing a version of.
Nowadays, a desirable quality is much more like female vocals, female focused. So it changes over time. But what we always tried to do with our music was we were never really chasing a trend ever. We were just trying to make stuff that we like. And so what I think we'll find over time is that like we hit one trend when Bartholomew was being synced a lot, and then things will change in the industry, and eventually it'll come back around to liking our kind of sound. And that's why we never really have tried to chase a certain sound. We just try to do what we really like and what we feel works, But I do think there are a couple things for bands to be aware of. Percussion forward is huge when it comes to sync stuff, because, when you edit something, you need a pacing, and, changing up a lot of crazy time signatures often is not a good thing for that world. And then also sometimes you have a feeling when you're a young band of just wanting to like go at 11 all the time on volume or intensity. And one thing that really works for that sync world is to have a lot of variation in the dynamics of your songs. Because a lot of times for movie trailers or television show trailers, they'll even cut multiple songs because they're trying to pack like a real arc of feelings into like a 30-second spot or a 60-second spot. Yeah. So we kind of created songs that have all that variation in them, and that's appealing to creative directors or music supervisors, because if they only have to pay one fee to sync one song, but they can get all the beats that they want out of it, that's really attractive to them.
Yeah, I would have thought something more steady, because, but I guess that's true. A trailer's trying to evoke, more than just one emotion rather than something more straight. So if you have say a pop punk band or something, for lack of a better genre to choose, that's just a more straightforward 4/4. That
more constant song could be really good for advertising, for like a cell phone commercial or something. But in a trailer, you have to have those dips, and then usually they'll bring the sound of the show in. Someone has to deliver a line or whatever, and so they need the music to come down to accommodate that. And it's interesting, it's a fascinating world, because everyone in the music world is trying to get those placements now, because money has gotten so dried up in the music industry. And so there's thousands of people trying to kind of crack the code of what will make their song the most appealing. And it just doesn't follow any set rules.
Yeah, and maybe even the example of you guys getting into Dark Souls is a perfect example of that. You just wrote a song and it happened to fit because you had a relationship with someone who ended up being creative in that part of that world.
I am alright. 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 I'm doing just fine. Yeah.
So you guys are back. You're playing again. I saw this pop up randomly and took me by surprise. What's going on with the band?
Well, we had taken a hiatus for quite a while from heavy touring. We used to tour like 9 months out of the year for years. And once we start to have more responsibilities in life and whatnot, it's difficult to do that. So we're trying to come back and be more of an active musical project. We're recording new music. We have plans for putting out a new record probably in spring of 2023, around that time. And in 2023, we're going to be touring a lot more. We're just going to be doing smaller chunks of dates and hitting certain regions of the United States. And then we're also exploring a lot of international options as well, because the last proper tour we did was in Europe in 2016. And we had a blast, and we love our kind of European fan base and whatnot. So we're exploring how to get across the ocean as well. It's cool for us as well to just creatively reconnect with it. I've been working in the film world a lot, and I've brought my brother into that. My brother works in the podcasting space and scores and sound designs a bunch of podcasts. And we're still very deeply in the creative world, but to come back to the silent comedy and collaborate again in that way has been so cool and so refreshing, especially when you take a little step back and you can come back to it with a new energy and new kind of thought process. It's been really exciting. And, people can go to thesilentcomedy.com and find out all of what we're doing. We're going to be launching a new Twitch channel.
Okay, hang on a second. You're launching a Twitch channel. I want you to go back to you in 2010 and say, hey, you're going to do this thing on the internet where you play video games and people watch you. What would you say to future you at that moment?
I would never have imagined it back when I was younger. And, saying that I wasn't a gamer, like when the Dark Souls thing happened, is not really the full story. Like, I was really into PC gaming way back in the day, like Prince of Persia and Load Runner and like all of these old PC games. And it was just that my life got so busy that I kind of didn't interact in that way. And so really in 2020, I got a Nintendo Switch and I started playing, Breath of the Wild and all this stuff. And now I've gotten deeply into games that I think are old for a lot of people, like Skyrim or whatever. But I'm really into it now. And so to think about getting into Twitch and also finally, after so many years, playing Dark Souls, and even if, we plan to have my brother and I play it, and even if we're terrible, it's going to be funny.
I was talking with someone recently and they were saying, look, if an artist came to us and said, they run a production company, and they said, some artists will go, we've got $10,000 we're going to put into a music video and it's going to be killer and it's awesome. And they do a great video and it gets 200 views on YouTube. And that's all that it does. And they were like, you could invest that money so differently today, which is weird because it's almost like you need every band, needs a drummer, a guitar player, a vocalist, synth person, and a social media player, just for how music is consumed. It's not consumed like, you go to the store, you find the record. Obviously this is an old man talking, or if you're hopeful that someone's just going to find your music online because you wrote a cool song, that's awesome. But there's billions of songs out there that are more accessible than ever. So you really have to think out of the box, like doing a Twitch channel or like these other things. So I'm glad you guys are doing that because more people need to know about what you're up to.
That's kind of the interesting thing is that, it is tough because none of us are really naturally social media minded folks. Yeah. And so it's definitely tough for us to kind of figure out how to interact in this world, but we're trying because like the avenues that people get reached with music are just so different than they were when we first started.
So
have to tell you this memory I have. We played together at our album release show at the House of Blues in Anaheim, 10 years ago now, maybe even longer. There's this barrier between the front of the stage and the crowd that it takes a little bit of a leap. I still remember you guys playing and then you stepping off the stage over this giant barrier, and I have literal anxiety attacks thinking about, I wonder if I could do that, and then just thinking of getting impaled by my guitar because I fell down the wrong way off the stage. Have you ever seriously injured yourself playing live?
Yeah, I've injured myself playing live quite a bit. I've injured other people, which, as we started to get more representation, that became a very serious discussion. We had to get tons of liability insurance and whatnot. Our lawyers and stuff freaked out. They were like, you can't do this stuff without intense insurance coverage. Those are the things, as a band grows, you start to realize all this stuff that you never thought of in the early days.
If I'm in on the lawsuit, am I getting money from the venue or from the band? And if you're a DIY band, I'm getting it from the venue.
Yeah, and you can sue both, so yes. It's definitely a tough area. But I've definitely hurt myself quite a lot. As we're getting active again, I'm pulling out my old pedal boards and stuff, and there's still blood on my pedals. I've hit myself in the face with my bass before, to the point of almost breaking my nose or almost knocking myself unconscious. I've been really fortunate to not have worse injuries from getting off stage and whatnot, even though it's a pretty risky thing to do in a lot of areas. Once we were playing this community festival thing in Central California in Morro Bay, and I went to get closer to the crowd and didn't realize that the platform that the monitors were on was not very stable at all. So I stepped onto that, and there's funny video because the whole thing just collapses underneath me, and I end up on the floor, but strangely, all of that stuff, and over so many years of touring, I've not sustained really major injuries, but I've had a lot of minor injuries. In our years of heavy touring, I was in pain every day of those years,
But the memories you created for people like me going, we got to go see what they're going to do tonight, and we got to see if we can get bones to break.
And for me, it was like a cathartic, therapeutic exercise. And so all of that stuff is part of this emotional release and part of this power that music has that very few art forms have, to move us emotionally and for us to release a lot of emotion that we have. And that's partly why I'm excited to be coming back and doing more shows again, because I've missed that. Some
bands will do stuff. I mean, I especially remember this with hardcore bands. Let's do this just for the sake of doing it. It didn't feel authentic. I believe you when you say that there's something from you that's coming out, not just, wouldn't it be cool if I, swung from the rafters tonight? But it seems like there's something coming out for you at that moment, other than just to be look at me.
Once we got more representation, people would come out to the shows. They would often ask me before the set, are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And I would tell them, I can't say at all. My goal for the silent comedy, the way we perform, is to connect with this power that the energy at a live show kind of creates. And it's a mixture of the music and the sound and the crowd and the energy that they're giving us and all of these things. And to just submit to that as a person. And, I overthink everything else in every other area of life. When we're on stage is the time when my brain turns off and I'm just trying to be part of this thing, this river of kind of energy, as goofy as that might sound.
Well, that's awesome. And I hope that people will go check out your music. I hope that what people have heard will just be cool in terms of helping. If you're in a band and you're watching this and wondering about how to even just kind of crack into this world, Josh has been around for a while. He's in the industry. He knows what he's talking about. But we need to watch you on Twitch try and play Dark Souls for the first time. Everyone go check them out online. Go check them out on Spotify and everywhere else. And Josh, thank you for joining me. It's good to see you again, you beautiful, beautiful man.
It's good to see you too. And it's, that's the other aspect of being in a band and being in a touring band that we really miss, is we made some of our best friends ever over the course of touring and going to so many towns, and we really miss that. You know, we haven't seen a lot of our good friends that we made in our touring years in quite a while. So that's the other aspect that we're really happy to connect to, is to just get out and catch up with old friends.
Well, hopefully it's not the last time, and I wish you and your family and everyone the best.
Thank you.